Hey, Old Roller Nation. I'm here with Chris. Chris Martin. We're gonna film just a quick lead into the podcast that we did last night because we both felt that maybe we did not transmit as diligently as was necessary how passionate Chris actually is about jiu-jitsu and about getting people to do jiu-jitsu and moving jiu-jitsu forward. And so we wanted to put that in the front so that everybody hears from the horse's mouth. He's had some tough times, he's had some bad experiences, but he's still a huge proponent of jiu-jitsu, just doing it in the in a way that maximizes our safety. So, Chris, that's the best lead-in I can give you. Tell us your side of that story as well, because that's
Yeah.
an important part.
So when you listen to this podcast, I just want everybody to listen to it with an open mind and understand that I'm looking to do jujitsu, for the rest of my life, just like everybody else. We love it, and just like Harrison said, I'm not here to stop our play or to stop the growth of the sport. I'm promoting the growth of the sport. I'm doing it by I'm a part gym owner in two gyms in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and also I'm a coach at Marquette University. I'm their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, and I'm working on pioneering the college Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu league. And so I can only see growth in the future of jiu-jitsu, but I do want people to be aware of the risks that they will encounter while they participate in jiu-jitsu over the years in their lives. We had a great conversation, the three of us in this interview, and we jump all over the place. The one point that I really didn't feel that I was able to touch on in the interview, though, is I talked about who I was before jiu-jitsu, but I never really talked about who I transformed into because of jiu-jitsu. And because of the jiu-jitsu and the people around me and the healthy lifestyle, I stopped. When I found jiu-jitsu, it took me out of the bars. It took me into eating healthier foods. It took me from 240 pounds down to when I was competing my lowest at 170 pounds. It kept me in the gym because I was working out for myself and I was working out for the of jiu-jitsu, and it took me out of the softball bar leagues. It took me and I dedicated my the last 12 years of my life every Friday and Saturday afternoon I was on the mats training, and I do it because I love it. I do it because what it does for my body, for my physical, my mental, my spiritual health, all of that jiu-jitsu encompasses. Because of that, I believe that the benefits outweigh the consequences. What happened to me is very rare, just like you'll hear in this interview. But because it's rare, it doesn't mean that the risk does not exist. So we just need to be able to identify the risk, which you'll hear in this interview. Once you identify the risks of jiu-jitsu, it's going to make you and your training partner safer so that you can participate in the sport for many years to come in a safe manner. And I want to see the sport grow. I want to see it safe in the universities when we grow the collegiate program, and in the little and big dojos that are popping up all over the world right now. We just want to keep it safe for ourselves and our family.
Chris, such an awesome message, and I sincerely appreciate you being willing to come back and just bring that up because I feel like we touched on it, but we didn't, like really get it expressed in a way that encompasses your passion for the art, and that part of it deserved its own voice too. And I think the Old Roller Nation is going to get a lot of value out of that. And so I wanted to be able to share it. You're going to hear like a car just passed. Sorry, I'm outside watching my kids, but I'm just so excited that you were willing to help us out.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Anytime. I appreciate your time, and I
Thank you.
appreciate I appreciate you getting this message out. And I'll let's recap in a 6 months or a year when this project gets off the ground more, and we got more to report.
We want to follow up not only on that, but also on the collegiate jiu-jitsu league as that
Yep.
grows, and we want to be able to help it grow any way we can, because even though
Sounds
we're
good.
old rollers, we respect the young rollers, because guess what, they're old rollers in training.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. I'm part of the old rollers. I'm 42, so I'm part of your crew. I'm on.
Yeah, well, like I said, if you're an 18-year-old roller, you're just an old roller in training because your day's coming.
That's right.
Thanks,
Thanks, brother.
thanks so much, Chris. Have a great day, and like I said, we'll be checking back in with you to get some updates on the news for you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Harrison.
Alrighty, my fellow old rollers, welcome to the podcast, Chris Martin and Ron Popkovich. Now, normally it would be me asking the questions and Chris answering, but today I asked for a helping hand. Ron has some experience with the issues that we're going to talk about from a medical standpoint, and just seemed like a good time to call in a teammate. So to get things started off, Chris, why don't you tell us who you are and where you're from and a little bit about yourself?
Yes.
First off, and welcome to the show, by the way. I got a little too excited there.
Appreciate it. I again, this is May 2nd. We're recording this, and it's Stroke Awareness Month, so it comes in good timing. My name is Chris Martin. I'm from a town called Mequon, Wisconsin. I'm 42 years old, and I'm a Marquette University graduate. That's a big college that we have here. Coincident, I graduated from them in 01. I ended up going back to coach their jiu-jitsu team in 2017. That's a whole other side story because that was right after my stroke. I had to learn to talk again, coaching them. So anyways, long story short, who I am, the best way that I could summarize it would be always did sports growing up. Always on the teams, did hockey, baseball, golf. I did it all. Parents very fortunate to put me in any sport that I wanted. I had a big mixed family, very competitive, older stepbrothers. You know, when I was the oldest from my family, then I have a stepbrother and I have 3 stepbrothers. So a very competitive family. Very entrepreneurial my whole life growing up. You know, like I tell my kids, had a car detail business when I was, 14 years old. Was caddying when I was 13, and I've been doing stuff like that ever since. Just business, and I always enjoyed doing my own businesses. I graduated from Marquette. My first job interview out of school was an employee benefits agency. My role was to call on business owners and help them enroll into small group health insurance programs. And that evolved. I stayed with the company for through that right out of college. I went right into it's just you're selling insurance. You're on the phone, you're in a cubicle, and you're selling, and you're doing it from 8 a.m. and you don't leave till 6 p.m. And when you're done, you blow off steam. And for 10, right after college, at Marquette in Wisconsin, and Marquette's a big beer, so it's like slam. The culture in Wisconsin as well is very beer and party orientated, and festivals, and so as a Wisconsin boy, after work, go down to the bar with my insurance buddies, and we would just slam down pitchers and wings, and it was, play some softball, go to the golf course, play golf, get hammered, go to the spots, go to play softball, get hammered.
You're singing my song, Chris.
That's Wisconsin, baby. That's why you guys like it so much. That's Wisconsin. So that's who we are down here. When I was 28, I ended up, I'll just, you guys asked me, who I am. I'll give you the lowdown, because I think it is important to this conversation with jiu-jitsu, especially, is, didn't have a lot of purpose in my life, though. I spent, at 28, when I found jiu-jitsu, I didn't have purpose. I had been selling insurance for 10 years, hammering and playing softballs and hanging out with the buddies, but I didn't have purpose. I was missing something. I had some health issues. I was heavier. unhealthy lifestyle, and then I had a good buddy of mine. His dad was at a boxing gym in Milwaukee, just doing boxing for, it was for fitness, but he was learning how to box too. It wasn't as much fitness as it was actual boxing. And it was taught by a guy named Scott Cushman, who's the head striking coach in Milwaukee at Duke Rufus Academy. So it's a big MMA program here in Milwaukee. Duke is like the godfather of Milwaukee when it comes to, striking. He's like the godfather of the whole world, actually. He's one of the best North American kickboxers to ever fight. So this guy named Marv, this older guy, was out down there doing boxing. He was like, my best friend's dad. We would go out with him. He loved it. He loved it. And he told me, go down, try it out. And I knew I needed something different because at the time in my life, like I remember one day, like, so I'm divorced. But when I was 28, right before jiu-jitsu, a friend, she and I, she got pregnant, and we ended up, getting married, and, we're still friends. I'm in her house right now with my kids. So, so things are good. There's always a good ending of the story, but she got pregnant, and, I was drinking too much, and I just knew something had to change. A couple times I came home from a Packer game, and it was just like a life's change because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to have a kid, like a family. Like that wasn't the plan. And it just happened. Big moment. And I remember coming home from the Packer game after my daughter was born. My first daughter. We have two great daughters now. They both train, and 13 and 10 they are. And I just had too much to drink, and it was an emotional night. And then I just knew I just had to change. Next day, I went down to the boxing gym. I signed up. Best decision I ever made. They had me lay down $1,000. It was a lot of money for me at the time. I swiped. I did it, and I tell everybody it's the best $1,000 I ever spent. Because I learned, like, I got my ass kicked. Would go home crying. Quit smoking during that time because I didn't want to be the guy that smelled like a cigarette. At the gym. And I did that kickboxing for a couple of years, lost, I was about 240 pounds, lost about 20 pounds, was down at 220. Wasn't like all the fighters yet. You know what I mean? I hadn't changed. Like all the fighters are all ripped and, the MMA guys. And I wasn't doing MMA. I was just doing, just a little bit of like, entry level boxing and a little bit of entry level kickboxing. And then, Duke said, hey, you should try this jiu-jitsu. We got this jiu-jitsu program, and it was new at the time. This is 2008. He said, give it a try. We tried it, and I tried it a couple times, and it didn't make sense to me, so I kind of quit. But then I went back to it. I kind of always thought it was this weird. Like I didn't wrestle or anything like that, so jiu-jitsu to me looked like these guys were like rolling around sweating all over each other. This is disgusting. I'm like, I'll just stick with the striking, and then, I knew something was different because this is when, Duke was just starting to get into the UFC, so they had to have a jiu-jitsu program. And so I knew something was different, and I kind of transitioned to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And since then haven't stopped since 2008. I've been training. I got my blue belt from Rodrigo Comprito Maguideros in Chicago. He gave me the blue belt. I got a my purple belt from Luis Claudio. He's a Hickson Gracie black belt from Brazil. And then I got my brown belt from Mark Lehman, who's a legendary old school jiu-jitsu fighter and UFC coach now. He's a legend. And so it's it's been quite the journey. There's been a lot of ups and downs, during that time. Jiu-jitsu has taught me so much. I lost a ton of weight, during like my peak, when I was first, as a white belt, blue belt, competing days, where it was like, oh, that's all we wanted to do was, white belt, blue belts. Like, that's all you think about jiu-jitsu. Like, oh, jiu-jitsu, like, you're just, it's crazy. Could it have something to do with my divorce? Maybe, you know what I mean? I also don't believe that, we're better friends anyway, you know what I mean? But jiu-jitsu definitely played stress on the family per se. There's a lot of sacrifice that goes into this jiu-jitsu, and people don't understand it. And then the significant others from the outside looking in, they want your attention, your time and your energy, and you're so focused on, your mind is somewhere else, and that's jiu-jitsu. It's addicting. But I think it's addicting.
If I was to guess, I would say that probably 80% of the blue belt blues and the loss of blue belts is probably just what you're describing right there. It's not something of like they're weak, or like they just accomplished something and they're like, okay, I did what I wanted. I would say 80% of it is you have some family problems come from that obsession, which we all experience.
So for me, training for the last 12 years, I look back on all the old pictures, and I think back of all the training partners and the people that I've met over the 12 years. And you're exactly right. A lot of people, a lot of it is family, so the one thing I do tell people, I'm like, the nice thing is like, jiu-jitsu is not going anywhere. It's just getting started. You know what I mean? So if you do have to take a break, for family or whatever, like, jiu-jitsu is becoming more mature as well. So there's good. It's not always going to be this alpha male dominated, mat area. It's going to be, you're going to see it mature where there's going to be, 40 plus, 50 plus, and I still see 60 plus guys competing on the mats.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a long-term sport. I'm all in it, and I've always been all in it. In 2014, so employee benefits. I built, so now 10 years later, after I come out of school, built my employee benefits brokerage business for somebody else. But during that time, met a client from the business, and he had a athletic center that was basically a 24-hour fitness center with a bunch of equipment in it, and it was just in a very unique spot. And I, at the time, had a cardio kickboxing. I partnered with a Muay Thai guy, and we were doing like a cardio kickboxing. We were renting a personal training boot camp studio. We were subleasing, and we started up this cardio kickboxing, like for like North Shore Nancy's per se, and it just was a hit. Yeah, so it made sense, and next thing you know, that was kind of during that hot wave of mixed martial arts, and or when it started to grow. Because I think right now we're still in this wave, but over that time, the boot camp went out of business, so we were scrambling to find a location for a bunch of our students. And at the same time, that business partner, the client of mine, his gym had basically gone out of business because there was so much competition. We got back together years later and decided, hey, let's take your gym and my gym concept, throw it together. And so now we have two gyms in Milwaukee, Wisconsin called Nova Gyms. Nova Gyms is, it's been a, so 2014, I literally in January pulled all the equipment out of this gym, freezing weather with this black belt from Brazil who could hardly speak English. And then we laid mats down, and next thing you know, we're in business. And it's been a wild ride since 2014. Running a business, running a community, managing employees, leaving that insurance brokerage to start my own insurance brokerage because things were going so well in that area. So then basically 2 startup businesses at the exact same time. And so then
you're a guy who likes problems, aren't you?
And so it's interesting that you say that because I'm one of those guys that my whole life I've been like the dig myself in a hole so I can dig myself out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm a performance based guy, and sometimes it takes a little bit of extra. Like I get bored pretty easily, so I gotta have a lot of action going on in my life.
I own a business, so I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't imagine doing 2 at once, though.
What's that?
I can't imagine doing 2 at once.
Well, you know, the from the gym standpoint, you would think, you know, it was more of because I had investor money, and it was pay the employees and expect everybody to run the business like, you know, you want the business to be run, and you know, I don't even have to tell you how that goes.
Right.
So, you know, you make your mistakes, but we made the. I tell people now, I'm like, listen, and the people who are at the gym right now will tell you everything happened for a reason because we're in a really good position now, and it does. Everything does happen for a reason, and even though things feel like at times like the world's crumbling from underneath, like right now, you know, we're sitting here having this conversation during COVID-19, and for a lot of people, it's, you know, it probably does feel like the end of the world. And I get it. A lot of people have their livelihoods in this, you know, business, and you know, I still have my insurance business on the side, you know, so so I'm not as affected as it by the other people who are maybe full-time coaches. So I feel for them, but you know, I think you know, what we're doing is, you know, we're keeping the engaged. We're doing online classes. Like I said, I've been coaching the Marquette team, and you know, those guys during the summer right now they're for cash, and I've got them teaching the online classes along with one of our other head purple belts who teaches the kids. They're doing online for the kids and keeping people engaged, and you know, that's we're definitely going to come on. You got to be creative with this whole COVID-19 thing, but I mean, we'll get back to normal. But I mean, it is what it is, and you got to find a way to adapt. You know, just like I've made an adaptation with everything in my life. So two startup businesses, things are going great. Both of the businesses are going great, and next thing you know, I'm laying on the mat, looking up in the air, completely paralyzed one day during practice, and couldn't speak. You know, every thought in my head. Somebody asked me a question, I couldn't speak. I didn't even know the answer. I knew the answer, but I couldn't process the answer when it was time to process the answer. So what that was a stroke. So since August of 2017 until now, it's been a hell of a recovery. I tell people, I'm like, I don't wish it on my worst enemy. But there's been a lot of learning experience. I'm very grateful for, you know, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I wish I could have, I know I could have prevented the stroke if I would have known, and if the people around me would have known. But so who I am, and with this whole stroke thing, is I am the guy who had this massive stroke and who loves jiu-jitsu, and who had no idea that anything like this could ever happen, because nobody's ever had that conversation with me. I've never read anything in forums. I've never read anything in Facebook groups, nothing ever, ever, ever. So even if I had the signs, which I did, I I didn't do anything because I didn't know the signs. So so here I am, 2020. Gyms are still going well. Insurance business is still going well. It's been hell. Definitely, when you go down, everything is affected. The businesses were affected for. It took us about a couple of years to dig out of that. You don't see it right away, but when you look at the spreadsheets, it goes like this when the main guy goes.
Right.
And then when the main guy gets back, it's a slow income increase. That's for both businesses.
So let's pause for just a second there, Chris. And I wanted to introduce Ron to kind of explain why he's here, what his experience is, and why we brought him on to help me make sure that we get the best information possible that we can then share with our listeners in the jiu-jitsu community. So Ron, real quickly, tell us who you are and what you do and what you're about.
Okay, well, I'm Dr. Ron Pavkovich from Lexington, Kentucky. I started my jiu-jitsu career a whole lot later. So I'm 45, going on 46 this year, and I started a year and a half ago, so at 44. Like you, was an athlete, played a lot of sports. I'm a former state trooper here in Kentucky, and I left the state police in 2003 and went back and did my doctorate in physical therapy. So my wife and I are both physical therapists. We own a clinic here in Lexington. We have 5 kids, twins and triplets. So we're on the same page on a lot of things. I haven't had a stroke, so you've got me beat on that one. But I have more kids, so it balances.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a stroke almost every day with my 5 kids.
Absolutely.
And I know the signs. So, so I train with Harrison, who is exceptionally helpful. Harrison has a really good gift of being able to teach as we roll together, and he's extremely analytical, which
that's very kind. I'm not necessarily certain I agree, but I'll appreciate you saying it.
Well, our coach would agree too. So, but Harrison helps me out a lot when we roll together because he's with his job. I mean, he's just excessively analytical and very kinesthetic, and that's how I am. I've got to see it, I've got to video it, I've got to watch it, I've got to talk about it, and I've got to do it, and that's how I have to learn it. So I'm a 3-stripe white as we speak, and
working on your pink belt.
Working towards the pink. But so kind of to tie in a little bit, and another part of my background is I teach nationally. So outside of my normal job, I teach physicians, PTs, nurse practitioners, PAs, acupuncturists, chiropractors, manual therapy. So spinal manipulation, like chiropractic adjustment, but PTs don't adjust because that's a chiropractic thing. And dry needling, which is similar to acupuncture, not acupuncture, but just so people have an idea what it is. So I teach, having done my fellowship in orthopedic manual therapy, I teach for a company, the American Academy of Manipulative Therapy, about 18 courses a year to providers on how to do these techniques. So a lot of the educational background that I have comes from having done my fellowship and teaching this nationally. So one of the big things we teach, first and foremost, anytime we're going to work on upper extremities or neck, cervical spine, especially from a manipulative standpoint, is signs and symptoms of a CVA or CAD, cervical arterial dysfunction, because that, in the grand scheme of people's fears in our profession and in chiropractic or even in osteopathic manipulation, is what are the chances of us causing a stroke to a patient? And in the grand scheme of things, there's no tie-in to those types of things causing a stroke. There have been some studies out there looked at. There have been some media cases in the past couple of years where chiropractic adjustment did cause a stroke, but like you said already, there's some precipitating factors out there that were probably very noticeable if somebody did the right screen to take a look to say, well, maybe we shouldn't do this. So that's where my background comes into play here.
Yeah, it's almost. I've read some of those studies as well, actually, and it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. The patient goes in and wants to be treated for some type of neck pain or something, and could that be the dissection, and then the adjustment is what triggers the choke or the stroke, or is the actual adjustment potentially causing any type of dissections? And we don't know, and it's just like you say, even in jiu-jitsu. So people are asking, tell us about some of this data that you have, and what are the, is everybody on steroids? Are we sure that it was jiu-jitsu related? And you can't guarantee anything. I could have dissected my neck doing yard work, and then had the signs, but didn't look at it, and then then I go and roll, and there's a clot sitting there, and somebody throws you in a chokehold, or torch the shit out of your neck, or something like that. Boosh! One of the guys who had a stroke is a black belt, and he believes what triggered the stroke was just a hard cross choke. So he was on his, or not cross choke, cross face. So he's on a side control, or he's on the bottom side control, and somebody's got that deep collar grip. You're kind of turtling in, and they're using that cross face either from knee on stomach or side control. And that cross face, he believes, is what triggered his stroke. Girls getting stacked up on their necks, and getting crunched down. Anything can cause a dissection. I've read an article on a golfer getting a dissection. I've read medical journals about rugby players and soccer players, and I'm in a number of carotid artery and young stroke survivor Facebook groups, and most of the survivors seem to be females. So a lot of females having strokes, non-jiu-jitsu related, from dissections, and that could be from them doing yoga, from them doing cardio kickboxing. Do you guys watch the Chicago Bull documentary right now by chance?
I'm gonna binge watch it. I don't have that network at this moment, so I'm gonna get it later. But it's definitely on the to-do list.
So I was watching it with my girlfriend. She's like a huge sports freak. I'm just jiu-jitsu. Like, all I want to do is watch jiu-jitsu. But she's a huge sports fan. So she got me to watch this. We don't watch much, sports together, because I just can't sit through it. But she got me to watch this because growing up, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen were the coolest shit to me. Yeah. And I'm learning so much from the documentary. So Scottie Pippen, in the beginning, they show his story, and they show that his dad had a stroke, and then later on in another episode, they show the series where Scottie had migraines. And I looked over at Nicole, or I looked over at my girlfriend Linda. Actually, I shouldn't call my girlfriend my ex-wife's name, or else I'll probably get.
Oh man, that stroke's going to be the least of your worries.
You may need to after that.
So
we should be able to edit that out on the back end.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But I looked at Linda. I go, oh shit! I'm like, I think he might have had a dissection, or was having a little mini stroke. Scottie Pippen, blurry vision, can't see, trying to play basketball, can't. So, I know we're jumping around here, but the night that I did have my blurry vision in my right eye, and again, the dissection was on my left carotid artery. So if for those that don't know how that works, basically if the clot's sitting here, it blows over here to the right side of my brain. So it would be my right eye would have blurry vision if this thing was torn. And so I do remember a night after practice, I couldn't pinpoint any type of particular choke, but during those months prior to the stroke, we were doing a lot of situational drilling with the back. So it's like you take my back with the over under, and basically you're trying to choke me. I have to escape. And then we switch. And this went on for, months. And, so we were doing a lot of back stuff. And a lot of it was, rear naked chokes. And, but really, I'll tell you right now, the back is the most dominant position in jiu-jitsu. There's, you don't have, even in self-defense, if in real life, if you want to get to somebody's back, because in jiu-jitsu, for jiu-jitsu to be effective in sport and winning the fight in sport and winning the self-defense in real life, if somebody's attacking anybody, you want to get to their back so you can choke them out, because like my coach Mark says, he's like, you can break their arms in the street, you know what I mean? But, they can keep coming back at you. Did you guys hear the story about, this is in the last 3 weeks, the story about the MMA fighter who's some random dude, UFC guy, I forget his name, but somebody broke into his house in the middle of the night. And he was all
Anthony
like,
Smith.
I think a white guy with glasses.
Yeah, his last fight was John Jones.
Yeah. So some dude just breaks into the house, and he's like, I was throwing everything at this guy, and he was taking it all. And he's like, and so that just shows you, it's like, you get somebody like yoked up on the street, you know what I mean, in self-defense, like, you got to get their neck and you got to kill it. You got to be really good at killing the neck. And since Mark came to our school, he's been there now for, I want to say 3.5, 4 years as the head coach. That's all he, not all, but like, that's the focus is like, hey, Mark, what do you, like, he's real big on questions. So like our class starts like this. Everybody's kind of sitting around. We don't go through the whole bout of the flags, karaoke, shuffles, and all that. It's basically, what's your questions, guys, that we need to work on? And I joke around, but everybody's like, okay, so what if I'm in this position here or this position here? What should I do here? And the basic answer is like, get to his back and choke him. That's our end goal. That's our end strategy. Like, that is what we want to do. We want to get to the back as quickly as possible, choke. That's how we want to end the fight. That's been the evolution of my game for the last 3 years. Is it possible that during those 2 months prior to my stroke, the amount of damage on the carotid arteries from the amount of training that I was doing on a consistent basis, not giving my arteries any time to heal, that damage caused a tear in my carotid, and I didn't know that I had this tear. I did feel under the weather, like allergies, and it felt like, I feel like I have a sore throat on this side, but it's only this side. It's really weird, and I felt like I had the flu a little bit. And like I said, weeks before I had the stroke, I did have blurry vision after practice. But as a guy, in jiu-jitsu, we don't know that strokes could happen to us. We're young and healthy. We think strokes happen to our grandparents, at 70 or 80 years old, sitting in the chair, or we think strokes happen to people who are, have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoke cigarettes, you know what I mean? And that's not, that wasn't me at all. So, and, I didn't know the signs of a stroke. Nobody told me about it. Nobody ever had the conversation with me about it. So I do what everybody does. Right eye, blurry vision after practice, chalk it up to dehydration, hard night of training, and let's drive home basically like after practice with my right eye shut, for a half an hour home to sleep it off. Well, that was probably the start of my dissection, and that clot probably sat there for weeks. And we know that it did because the doctor said that when he took the clot, when they shot the TPA to my brain, it's a clot busting drug to kill the clot. They said that the clot there was still a big piece of the clot sitting on my neck, so they had to put a stent in my neck. So I went through those weeks. Train, chalk it up to dehydration, got to be there for the team. And then one day during practice, I'm in a north-south choke. I wasn't feeling well. I wasn't feeling myself. I was totally off. I wasn't moving well. But again, I was just chalking it up to, hard week. Maybe I am a little bit under the weather. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And my boy put me in a north-south choke, and I wasn't getting out. But I was breathing, and I didn't feel like he had made the adjustments yet that were going to make me need to tap. And I was just protecting. And because I was breathing, I thought I was okay. And then finally, he just let go, and then my body was just basically lifeless. Like I couldn't sit up, I couldn't talk, I couldn't speak, and that was it, man. It was. Everybody's kind of looking at me, and I'm just like that. You ever see remember the teacher in Charlie Brown? Where it's like,
yeah,
that's how I was talking. What the fuck is going on? Nothing. The words weren't coming out of my mouth. I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't move the right side of my body, completely paralyzed. And it took them about 3 or 4 minutes to figure out something wasn't right. Finally, they called 911, and they had to call 911. I mean, I wasn't walking anywhere and I wasn't talking, so something was seriously wrong. Unlike some of the other stories I hear about, where I've heard other stories too about, they're still kind of talking, but something's not right. But the coach, they could still drive home, and later on is typically usually when they have their big strokes. So mine was, I guess I was lucky that it was so boom, right in front of everybody, because they were able to get me right away to the hospital, because you only have 6 hours to shoot this clot busting drug to my brain. It's called TPA. If they missed that window, if this stroke would have happened to me at home by myself in the shower, after practice, I would have been paralyzed, dead, brain damaged. It would not be good for me. So essentially, I'm kind of lucky that it happened so quickly at the gym. The paramedics, basically came. They threw me in the ambulance. Nobody told me what was going on. I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't move my body. And I just remember getting the freighter at Milwaukee, and they were trying to communicate. Trying to get some vitals, trying to get me to talk, trying to, and I was trying, but just nothing could come out. And they're like, okay, they were just getting me closer and closer to the operating room. And then right at the end, they said to me, they're like, can you move any part of your leg? And I go, and I just put all my mind on, and it just moved a little bit. They're like, it moved. They're like, put him down now. And that's all I remember. And then boom. My sister said that it was a young doctor came out just in his street clothes, just sweating his ass off. And my sister said it was like this dude had an absolute adrenaline dump. Like he was sweating. He was like just and they said, he's like, we got it. And, we don't know, like, we can't give you any answers. We did the best we could. And that was like, they were asking questions like, what was that about? Like, what does he do? He does MMA. They're like, well, he, cause I'm a young, healthy dude. And they were just confused, but they saved my life. I couldn't speak for a while. I had to go back to, speak. I walked out of the hospital, but I walked out with like no feeling in my hand, really, not much feeling in my legs and feet and stuff like that. So I just had to like you just got to get back to life. It was really a really tough bounce back. I do have brain damage. It's almost like I'm dyslexic. I can still type. I can still put together sentences, and I do type, but sometimes it doesn't come out the way it's supposed to come out. But these days you got spell check and all that kind of stuff, so the error is a lot smaller for me. And everybody does understand for the most part. Otherwise, you can go on Fiverr these days, Fiverr.com, and you can hire somebody to do your proofreading if it's really that important. And typically that's what I do if I have like a presentation or something, or a blog that I have to do. I'll just, I'll need to hire somebody because it just doesn't come out like it used to. So that's essentially what happened to me, and that's been the journey so far. You still have Ron on here?
Yeah.
Good.
Let's talk about the signs leading up to it. You had some blurry vision. It sounded like you had some sore throat sort of issues. Ron, as you were hearing that from your perspective, like what things are those signs leading you to think? Like, what's coming to your mind?
So as we were going through this, as Chris was talking about it, what I think would be good and what I think a good takeaway out of this, and with my background and starting older and already having this information in my head, that's one of the things that I would like, from a medical standpoint, would like to see if you're going to be new to jiu-jitsu or new to MMA or really any kind of a contact sport, whatever it is, wrestling, whatever. And as well as I do, coaches aren't well versed in any of this. I mean, just like physicians aren't well versed in jiu-jitsu risk from choking or from neck cranks or from whatever it is that's causing, trauma to the head and neck, in thinking, oh, wait a minute, I should ask right away, do you do, combat sports? Do you wrestle? Do you whatever? They ought to be able to look, especially if it's somebody who's seasoned and if they have the ear appearance, that ought to be the first thing. Hey, this guy does something, we need to think about stroke right away. But from a coaching standpoint, in my experience in starting jiu-jitsu, it's like, I don't even know if it's as welcoming as like the new person at an AA meeting. It's like, hi, I'm Ron. I'm here for jiu-jitsu, and it's like, oh, okay. We'll see what happens if you last long enough, if we give you any attention.
It's yeah.
So there's definitely not a whole lot of intake for new people. It's just kind of like, all right, come up, learn some stuff and see if you last. And then we'll start, we'll start putting names and faces together.
Yeah, right.
But especially for the old group, and this is why it's so important for the old group, whether you have been rolling for years, I would say even more importantly, if you've been rolling for years, if you've been wrestling, if you've been in MMA, and you're getting older, there are classic signs and symptoms. And I think coaches and as business owners, to protect yourself, should verse themselves in these symptoms for the sake of their business, their class, and for the sake of the safety of the individuals joining and rolling. So, there are some specific risk factors that we're looking at when it comes to CAD, cervical arterial dysfunction. When we're talking about CAD, we're talking about your internal carotids, which was your issue, and then you have the vertebral artery or the vertebral basilar artery, and so those four arteries, two on each side, supply like almost 80% of the blood flow to the head. So they're four extremely important arteries, and those are the arteries typically that specifically for CAD that we're talking about, that we have concern about, and we want to do our best to rule out any pre-existing issues. But some very frequent things that people need to be aware of. If they have a history of migraines, and legitimate migraines, not, I think everybody who has headaches says, oh, I have migraines. Well, if they're taking migraine medications and the medications are working for them, they've had truly diagnosed migraines, that's a risk factor. I mean, that's something to keep in the back of your head. If there's past trauma, history of trauma to the cervical spine, to the neck, and to the cervical vessels. Well, if you wrestle, if you do MMA, if you play football, if you do jiu-jitsu, you have a past history of trauma, or you will have a past history or an ongoing history of trauma to the cervical vessels and neck. Ain't no way around it. It's just what we do. So again, another risk factor. High blood pressure is a risk factor. A history, obviously, of cardiac or vascular disease, like a previous CVA, a previous transient ischemic attack, or a mini stroke. If you have diabetes, if you have a blood clotting disorder, history of smoking, blood thinners, trivial head and neck trauma. So let's say you're working in the garage and you're bent over and you come up and you hit your head on a shelf. I mean, just mild trauma that you wouldn't even think twice about can be a risk factor. And for women, in women's case in particular, if they're immediately postpartum, that's another risk factor as well. But symptoms of vertebral or carotid artery dissection. This is where Chris is, or where Chris was. The two arteries can have very similar presentations, and the presentations can be something that, as you stated and as you saw, were going on for a while, and you don't even think twice about it, especially in the jiu-jitsu realm. Okay. Because more often than not, if you really get into the studies and you really get into the research and you look at blood flow studies, there's a couple guys out there and some other authors, but Carey and Taylor, two guys, two researchers who have done a lot of extensive study on blood flow in the carotids and the vertebral-basilar arteries, just looking at normal neck movements, and again, comparing that to manipulative type testing or adjusting procedures. And when you get in and you really look at these studies, more often than not, what the research says is it was probably something already, a dissection that was already there that you didn't know about, was presenting mildly, and whatever the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, the offending insult at that particular moment. It wasn't really that, it was already there. It was already occurring, and this just happened to be the push over the ledge. You were already at the edge waiting to jump. But again, you don't know that, and the average person doesn't know that. So, but early signs, when we're looking at the vertebral artery, there can be mid to upper cervical pain, so kind of like mid-neck up into the base of the skull area. Occipital headache, so one-sided headache. But again, that can be migraine. That can be what we call cervicogenic headache, a headache that is originating from the neck, and it's not an arterial defect issue going on. And if you get headaches or neck pain that's described as pain unlike any other, like the worst, it just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's like somebody just taking a ball-peen hammer inside your head or your neck, just random out of the blue, not a typical migraine or a typical headache, just pain unlike any other. And if you look at the common thread in these, one of the main things in the early signs of these vertebral basilar or carotid artery dissections is specifically that pain described as unlike any other, and headaches. And those are big things.
Yeah. So since my accident, I've been documenting a number of these cases from jiu-jitsu, basically doing Skypes just like we are now. And then I have a YouTube channel. You can throw the link up. That would be awesome.
Absolutely.
So for people to subscribe, and I post just these general interviews. And the reason I did it was from 2017 on, is so other people who had this could find me and know, number one, they're not alone. And then the reason I would record the interviews is so that we could look back and say, okay, time to do some medical research, because if this becomes a big thing, we're going to need to know what's going on. And so I've got a number of them up on YouTube right now. I've got a number of them throughout this month of Stroke Awareness Month. I've got the list of people that I got to interview. These people have been having strokes since 2017. So, I mean, it's not like, they had it in 12 or 2008. Like, it's like 2018, 2019, 2019, 2019, 2019. Like, it's like, it's happening. Like, and a lot of that's going to be because we have more people participating in the sport. It's more mainstream. Like I said, initially, it's still growing. It's a more mature sport now. And so we're going to start to see this a lot more if we haven't, if people in training facilities haven't already. What I've seen so far, Ron, is a lot of the headaches and the shooting headaches and the migraine type and the pain in the back of the neck. That most of those are the vertebral dissections in our group, and the carotids seem to be more of that, like the eye, like the blurry vision on the eye. Like, I never had any headaches or anything like that. It was some vision issue. And now also, so way before my stroke, I was training with this guy when I first started doing knee bars. And so this is probably like 3 years prior to my stroke. So this is probably like 2012. So that'd be 5 years prior. I was getting really good at these knee bars, and I ended up going with this shooting this knee bar, and I had it really tight, and I put the dude's toe into my eye, like his big toe, and it hemorrhaged, and there was all kinds of issues with my eye, and there was like misdiagnosis, and like they thought it was a scratch, but then it was a hemorrhage. So my right eye, I have a little bit less vision in it already from that accident, and even after the accident, I had a little bit of droopage in my eye because they were putting steroids in it and shit, and it just never like came back. But then, like, I remember, like, during that, like, time period before my stroke, I remember after practice one day looking at, like, man, my eye looks a little bit more droopy than normal. So the eye more drooping than normal, the blurry vision in my eye, the sore on one side of my throat, the not feeling well under the weather, those. If somebody would have sat me down as a white belt and said, Chris, you're going to fucking love jiu-jitsu. Trust me, I promise. Now, let me warn you. You might get divorced, but trust me.
But trust me.
And I'd be like, okay, yep, Coach, I believe you. And then he says, listen, here's the thing. You know that one thing we call the Mata Leon? Yeah, I Naturally, what does that mean anyway? Oh, it means rear naked choke in Portuguese. It means lion killer. Why do they call it lion killer? Because the most effective thing that you can do to somebody is to kill their neck. Oh, okay. Oh, by the way, because of that, just like Ron said, he says it a lot better than the coach would probably say it, but goes through all the different veins, explains how it works. That's how the chokes work. Yeah, we just cut these off, right? That's how we pull the gi. Yeah, that gi's cutting off that carotid right here. Like, yeah, you can choke that guy out. Yeah, but why we're doing that, just be aware. We are doing, I'm not saying that you just need to be aware that over time there could be damage to your carotid arteries. And if you ever, usually it doesn't happen. It's very, very rare. And the guys that we train with here, they all are aware too. So they're really good at tapping early. And when people get and they're not going for kamikaze chokes. So you're in a really, because we've already had this talk with all these guys. That's what should happen in the sport. What's not happening in the sport is that. That's why I had the stroke. I had all the signs. Nobody ever told me about it. And if this was something that is what was more like this could happen, then I would have been like, oh wow, hey, I had a blurry vision, or I saw that droopy. I didn't, I'd go to the doctor because this was embedded into the whole safety curriculum from day one.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, right now, so the reason that I'm pushing out this content and pushing it into Facebook groups and whatnot, it's only for that purpose, is to let people know what's up. Maybe they'll take some time to look at it. Maybe they won't. I've had some people kick me out of groups. Some coaches kick me out of a Facebook group. And again, from my standpoint, I think that brushing it under the rug is the wrong attitude to have. I can tell you right now, over the last 2 years, I've had a number. Not only do the practitioners who have the strokes contact me, but sometimes their wives contact me, and their wives are pissed. And sometimes their wives wonder why the instructors didn't have this conversation with them. And some of the instructors have just admitted, I didn't know this could happen. And some of them just want to just brush this under the rug, and they want to pretend like he probably had some type of pre-existing condition. He probably had this, he probably had that, and probably jiu-jitsu is not for him or her. And unfortunately, there has been a couple of the survivors who that's how their gyms have handled it. And that's been a bad experience for them. Coming, yeah, too bad for you. So
Well, and what you were saying, earlier, is that jiu-jitsu, while it may be sort of we'll call it carotid trauma intense activity, you can have traumas of those four arteries from non-intense activities too.
yes.
So
I mean, probably I've seen people at the computer crack their head like this because they're trying to adjust themselves. The next thing you know, they have a stroke.
yeah,
And you're right. Like it could be like you're driving and all of a sudden like you wrench over to look over, and those little things could cause that you said it. Trauma to the artery is a good way to put it.
Chris, and you being specific to the carotid artery, and I had mentioned the vertebral,
Yeah.
but other things, and you already touched on it, is the drooping eyelid.
Yeah.
There's a condition called Horner syndrome.
Yes.
So drooping eyelid, which is called ptosis, you get a constricted pupil, dry skin on the affected side. So just some real random dry skin on the affected side. Delayed dilation of your pupils. So let's say if you shine a mag light in your eye, what happens? Your pupil constricts. Well, when you take that mag light away, what happens? It comes right back and dilates. So instead, it stays small and then slowly starts to dilate back. And then different size pupils, one big, one small, because your pupils work together. So if you shine a light in this one and it constricts, this one constricts with it.
Okay.
All right. So they work together. So if you've got one that's here and one that's here, and it's just something that people could look at themselves and say, man, do I have a drooping eyelid? Do I have a constricted pupil? Do I have different size pupils? Am I getting dried skin? That's a really good sign of internal carotid dysfunction. For people
the message that I'm hearing from both of you guys, because you're both practitioners of the sport, you're both healthy, athletic guys. The thing that's being communicated is not don't do jiu-jitsu. It's let's be intelligent about the way that we do jiu-jitsu with the knowledge that this thing exists, and
Yep.
if we do it intelligently, we reduce the risk. And if we know the signs, we can see the risk coming. Maybe we can stop someone before they get to this point where they're injured and they have like a life-changing event.
Could say it better myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think it's imperative from a white belt standpoint to hear that, because the longer you're in, the more trauma you get and the better control you have of yourself, and of your partner, you recognize, yeah, I'm just not going to get into that position. Like you said, tap early, tap often.
Yeah.
White belts, and I'll be the first to tell you, and just like you guys, it's always go as hard and as fast as you can. I can't control myself. You can't control yourself. And then so when you sink something in, you're putting 1,000% of yourself into it. So if you can instill that early, especially in the old rollers group, us old farts who, are starting in your 40s, or who've been lucky enough to make it to your 40s and still able to do it. I think that's probably the best thing you could take from a safety standpoint out of the game.
Well, from the coaches, the practitioners, the PTs, that we've interviewed, overwhelming consensus has been, and not just in relation to this, because this isn't a topic that has really come up, but the overwhelming consensus of all things in terms of skill development, everything, is ego needs to go first. And you have to, if you're caught, just say I'm caught. Like, don't try to just wrestle your way out of it, because if someone has a fairly tight choke on you and you start, moving around, well, now, you're contributing to a potential traumatic event. Whereas if you just say, okay, you got me, it sucks. I'm not trying to pretend that I like tapping. Nobody likes tapping. But in jiu-jitsu, we say position before submission. If you're in a deep rear naked choke, man, you've lost the positional battle and you've lost the submission battle. You're there. So just the fact that you could have aggroed your way out and you don't, that doesn't mean that you lost. You lost because you were there, not because you couldn't muscle your way out of it and potentially hurt yourself.
Right.
I know a lot of the it's one of those things with the tapping. It's like the easier said than done, just like you said. Mm-hmm. And for me, even after my stroke, it's taken me a while. The old school jiu-jitsu mentality is like, you fight out of it. You know what I mean? I remember as a white belt, my coach on the sideline looking at me and saying, don't you tap, like fight out of it. You know what I mean? So, and that was my mentality as well, all through purple belt. And that was my mentality as well with my training partners who were white belts coming in. Dude, I would mimic my coach. Don't you tap. I want them to develop like I developed. And now it's different. It's when we do the fundamental classes, usually the white belts who are in the class have already taken a 1 week or 2 week fundamental series with me, and I don't lay it out the first day. I just go through the basic stuff the first day, and then the second day, if they come back, we go through a couple more things, and then, once we get to the back, okay, they're comfortable, they're here. I'm not going to scare them away on the first day, but after I put them through this, 3-day, 4-day trial, we get to the back. Well, here's how the choke works, and oh, by the way, you're not going to be applying that choke on me to practice because I've got a stint here, and this is the story. This is how it happened. But when you get over there, you're going to have more training partners. Here, let me show you how I do it to you and how you can feel. You can feel a little bit of tightness, but I'm not going to rip a bow and arrow on you right now to show you how cool and tight this is to make you feel that whoop. Like, that's not what we want. So you still can teach and coach, and we can still go through the reps, like in training practice, like back, like you take my back and we're working some type of collar choke. We don't have to do the whole like pull and squeeze as hard as we can. And as training partners, we don't have to be the good training partner that lets you pull it and crank as hard. Keep going, tighten it up. I'm not passed out close. You know what I mean? I've been there before. I've been put to sleep before because I held out so long because I was trying to be a good training partner. Looking back on that, I'm like, oh my God, are you an idiot? And some of the guys that did have strokes, that was the exact same story. A lot of the triangle guys, a lot of the guys who had triangles, it was in practice, and it was somebody gets the triangle, grabs the back of the head, hips up, pulls up, and then we're tapping, and we do this like 12 times, back and forth 2 times each. And this has happened in multiple people, and they know that that's what caused the stroke because, think about it, like how often, like that part that you're practicing, that's the end. Just like you said, Harrison, that's where you've got yourself like so far in the triangle where they got it pulled in and it's finished with all the details, and then they're hipping up and pulling your head down. And like, we don't get there that often. You know what I mean? Like, you really shouldn't, because you should be fighting. You should be standing up in the garden, fighting out of, and posturing up and whatnot. And if you're doing those things, if somebody breaks you down, hand across, probably ready to. You should probably be tapping before they grab the back of the head and hip up. But in practice, we're grabbing the head and hipping up full power, and a bunch of guys have had the vertebral tears from those triangles. So we have to be. Say it again.
It's that neck crank position. That's
Yeah,
where your vertebral arteries get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Even in the gi, my associate Josh Vera, he's a black belt in Cali. He also had a stroke. He's different than me. He and I are different because of this. We both had strokes. His was vertebral, mine was carotid, right? But the difference is this: he works in the medical field, in the emergency room, and knew that dissections could happen. But as a black belt, thought it would never happen to me. And he had a vertebral. The difference between me is that I had no idea this could ever happen, and you know what I mean. So, 2 different sides of the spectrum, but we both had strokes from jiu-jitsu in jiu-jitsu class. So again, that's the reason that I'm spreading the awareness, is so that you're right. The coaches just they have to if they don't think they have a responsibility, they're sorely mistaken. They have a responsibility to every one of their clients' families, because these guys have kids. I have kids. These guys who have stroke have kids. These guys have businesses. They have jobs. They're entrepreneurs. They work in the emergency rooms. They, you name it. I mean, I've got a list of, like I said, we're close to almost 100 on our spreadsheet of documented cases, and there's still people that are in my DM because when I post these blogs, people find it and then they pass it on to somebody else. Like, remember when this happened to you? And then, yeah, that's just how this whole thing is snowballing. So we are confident that the reason that you're seeing more now, everybody's going to say, well, how come people have been rolling for years? How come we have never heard of this? Not many people have been rolling for years, even in Brazil. And even if it's happened in Brazil, we don't know about it because those guys don't speak English. They don't have internet. Now they do, but over the last 10 years, there's no they're not savvy on, posting articles and blogs and videos, so forth and so on. So we probably wouldn't even know about it anyway. I do need to get my content that I've put up over the last 2 years. Somebody needs to translate it in Portuguese because I would like to see the response, because again, people come to my YouTube videos in the comments because they go on Google and they type in, can you have a stroke in jiu-jitsu? And they find my articles, they find my blogs, YouTube. I need to get that stuff in Portuguese because then I bet you people will reach out. They're just not hearing the story right now. There's an 18-year-old kid, purple belt Abu Dhabi champion in Brazil a year and a half ago. He had a stroke. They don't know why. But I could bet you that he probably had a carotid or some type of tear. His clot blew when he was doing pull-ups with the gi. You know what I mean? So your head's kind of wrenched back like that, and you're kind of torquing. I would bet. I mean, this kid's ripped. Everybody, when his article came out, like everybody in the BJJ world's like steroids, steroids, steroids. The reason everybody's calling steroids is because if you look at the only medical, there's only like 2 or 3 medical reports published on strokes in jiu-jitsu. One of them is it says he does steroids, and he did. He did do steroids. I talked to him. The other 2 haven't, but everybody finds that one first. And again, that's not typical of the people who are having these strokes in jiu-jitsu.
Does steroid use increase stroke risk?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it does. That's as like some of the people are saying, like the TRT does. But again, it's one of those things. I was thinking about it today when I was doing yard work, and I'm like thinking about all the things that could cause a stroke, because I'm hearing right now, COVID-19 could cause a stroke. I'm outside shoveling today. That could have caused a dissection or a stroke. So it's like, it's almost like you can't pinpoint. I think Ron said it best. Is like if almost everybody's at risk of dissection. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, anything could happen at any time, so we're all kind of at risk. Is it possible that some are more at risk than others? Absolutely. But in jiu-jitsu, I think that's where we need to that's the awareness of, hey, let's just say, is it possible that we're getting a lot of neck trauma and that could cause, tear? And when you step back and think about it logically, yes, it makes sense. So is jiu-jitsu a sport that you're going to see more strokes and dissections? Time will tell. I'm guessing yes. We have started the medical people in the medical arena they get very excited when there's new research like this that they can write journals on. So people have reached out to us, and we begin to compile this data and put it out there so that all the doctors, whoever is excited about this, can have this data of the stroke people and to take that data and do any type of study necessary.
I was going to offer that to you. That was actually my next statement, is if you ever wanted to do it, because I publish as well.
So here's where we're at in this whole process. A number of people reached out to us. Doctors, we're working with right now. We're working with Dr. Sam. He's in Minnesota, and he's done some studies already on chokes and whatnot in jiu-jitsu. He's a black belt as well, and he agreed to help get this. Like I said, I've got a spreadsheet, but that means nothing. People want to see medical literature, so the stroke survivors that Josh and I have this community most of them have agreed that, no, whatever you need, Chris, I'll send you the medical records. We'll sign off on the HIPAA docs, use our information, whatever it takes to get this out to the community. That's where I would say 80% of these people, our network of support, that's where they are right now. So right now, like, I got my medical records, I got my scanning, my disc, which shows all my imaging, and we're sending that in. Once all this is in, the doctors and the hospital publish it. It's in, so you can see the data, you can see what's happening. So this first step is identify. This is a subgroup of people. This is the martial art. This is what they're doing. And here are cases of people who have had it, so that, just like Ron said, when somebody comes in, it's not just to the chiropractor, because they probably are coming to the chiropractor off, oh, I got head, my neck hurts, I need an adjustment. But then also when they go into the ER room, these emergency rooms are missing dissections a lot. And how I know this is because they're missing them in jiu-jitsu practitioners, because this is my network of people. This is their stories. And even first responders are missing this stuff. The dissections are very hard to find.
I've sent patients of mine, which is very rare, because I screen them all, and it's only been a few times, and I've sent them back to their provider saying we need, we need an arterial study with contrast, and they have told their patients that PT doesn't really know what they're talking about, and I'm like, this is something I teach all over the U.S. multiple times a year, and it's like, well, they don't really know what they're talking about. But if you look at it, like you said, I mean, how many of them who should be ordering the images when the signs and symptoms are there actually take the time to listen? It's like, but who cares?
That's the biggest issue. And I think you identified it, Ron. If they're not getting it with contrast, they're missing it. Because if the doctors are looking for strokes, they're not going to see the strokes. They need to be looking for dissections, and a lot of them, even in Josh's case, they missed it, and then they had to send it to somewhere else, and then the guy looked at the report again, and then they found it. So that is another example of how and that's why I'm putting this information out for the coaches, is to say, this is also your students' responsibility. This is us. We have to take our healthcare in our own hands now, because the system has changed, and we have to tell them what kind of imaging we want, and we have to have the stats. And exactly like the doctors, their egos. Somebody comes in and says, hey, my PT says this. The doctor, again, the ego is probably so, like, those guys need jiu-jitsu more than a lot of regular. I mean, listen, these guys, the people at Freighter, they made my life. You know what I mean? I can only imagine they feel like absolute gods. You know what I mean? Because you are saving lives. You know what I mean? And they should feel like it. But at the same time, you need to have that ego checked a little bit. You know what I mean? No matter what you do in life. And that's what jiu-jitsu is so great at doing.
We had an interview recently with a combatives instructor for police officers. And he said it was extremely hard to convince police officers to come and train jiu-jitsu because they're trained to believe in themselves. They're trained like, if I get in a spot, I'm going to be fine. And it's hard to convince someone, because you need him or her to have that mentality. Like, if you're going to send somebody, into a place of danger, you need them to believe that they're going to be okay. But that belief also makes it hard to get them to buy into more and more training. So the same thing with the doctor. I mean, if I go to the ER, I want this doctor believing that he can and will save me. I need him to believe that. But you also have to have, that bit of, jiu-jitsu ego check, where it's like, well, yes, I am very competent, but I don't know everything.
And jiu-jitsu does a good job of holding us all accountable and keeping us all in check.
What I wouldn't give to know what I know now, 20 years ago, 18 years ago, when I was a trooper, and we've talked about it, Harrison. It's the false sense of what you actually know and what you can actually do. It's a necessary false sense for the job.
Absolutely.
It's a false sense.
Well, and further what we're talking about when you talk about personal responsibility, and it is my belief that no physical activity is without risk. Anything that you do, let's say you like bicycling, you like yoga, you like whatever, you can become too flexible and, have joint problems because you have so much joint laxity that, you start to, wobble and fall apart. So there's just no completely safe physical activity. But a complete lack of physical activity is a guarantee that you are going to have a heart that explodes. So we got to do something. We got to do something probably that we enjoy, so that we'll do it consistently. And that's been another thing that this podcast has taught me, is that above all things, even including injury prevention, consistency is 80%. Like, if you just do whatever you do consistently, you'll probably be safer and better over time more quickly. So you got to like what you do. You got to like that physical activity, because if you don't, it's going to be hard to convince yourself to go do it. So we know jiu-jitsu is an obsessive activity. We don't like it. We fucking love it. We live for it. So we want to do it. We got those two parts covered. And people are going to be, because they're obsessive, they're going to be consistent. So what we have to add to it is the risk management. Understand these risk factors, understand the signs, and then make intelligent decisions and act intelligently based on that information. Don't not do jiu-jitsu. Do jiu-jitsu intelligently and safely.
Right.
That's 100%. I mean, that's my message, and I think you guys both couldn't have said it any better. Which is a breath of fresh air, because sometimes it's tough to communicate it. And just like you said in the beginning, Harrison, you're like, if I can figure it out, then we're making progress, because we're probably getting closer to helping the rest of the community figure out. You guys have both done a really good job of hammering down and putting it in layman's terms, because it's even for me still, like I'm deep in this research, but I'm still learning, and I'm not a doctor. I haven't studied this stuff, but I'm learning from just hearing the signs of other people. Hold on 1 second, guys. I just got to pull out a chicken out of this oven real quick.
Yes.
All right. We're good.
So for those who listen to this on audio, Chris just ran. He's recording in the kitchen, and he just ran back and pulled a chicken out of the oven. So we're going to be expecting some of that, Chris.
Yeah, it's recipe here is easy recipe for healthy eating with chicken. All you need is a little bit of olive oil, Himalayan sea salt, a little bit of black pepper, a little bit of garlic salt, and a little bit of lemon juice. And that's all you need to do to put on your chicken. If you don't know how to bake it, cut those things up into little fillets, throw them in the oven for, I like to do about 365 for about 40 minutes, because I get weird with my chicken. I don't like it too, I want it like a little bit more well done. And then I'll just put some hot sauce. I don't want salmonella. What's that?
So
You don't want to get salmonella.
No. Yeah, no.
So to kind of pass this over to Ron for a second, I've kind of given like the layman's term, or we might say the moron's way of looking at it. Ron, when you're looking at this and taking this information and trying to, make a broad, a big picture analysis of it, to then hand off to a coach and say, here's a way that you can hand this information to your prospective students. You're not running them off. You're not saying, hey, if you do jiu-jitsu, you're going to have a stroke. You're saying this is a possibility. It does happen to people. It can happen doing other stuff too. So it's not like while we are, like an activity that does have neck trauma, it's not like you're just guaranteed to get it. It's very low percentage. How do you, present that in a way that this business person is not scared? Like if I let people know this, I'm probably running at least 30% of them out the door. Like, what's a way that you can pass this information along that lets both the instructor and the student have a shared responsibility for understanding and, acting on this? Because we know they're going to love it. Like, it's just like, if you do it for 3 weeks, if you're back after 3 weeks, you're going to be obsessed. So how do we create that situation where we can hand it off to coaches and them not be afraid that if I let people know about this, I'm going to have to go back to work at the factory?
I tell you, I think what Chris is doing to his students is I don't know if I could have put it any better. I think giving your first couple of days of the introduction of what's going on and, terminology and all the stuff that, it took us a year to figure out. And that's just by showing up and researching it on your own. I think, a couple of days of introductory stuff and positions, mounts and guards and whatever, and then getting into back take or choke positions and being honest. At least from my standpoint, maybe I'm a little bit different because I come from a medical standpoint, but I'm a very black and white kind of a guy. You give me the honest viewpoint. Don't sugarcoat it. But to the average person, it just needs to be truthful, but not hammered to them. It needs to be just like Chris said. Hey, in these positions, we can put a lot of pressure on the arteries of the neck. If you compress the arteries of the neck repeatedly over time, there's a small chance. And if you look at the number of jiu-jitsu players in the world in history, and the number of strokes at least recorded, and Chris probably knows way more of them than any literature or anybody else knows because of his condition and what he's been researching. They are statistically insignificant, but none of them are insignificant.
It's damn sure not insignificant if it happens. Yeah.
But statistically speaking, it's almost not there.
Right.
But kind of like the COVID virus right now, in the grand scheme of things, small statistics compared to the people infected. But for the people infected, it's world changing for them, life changing. So it just needs to be honest. It needs to be here's the possibility. This could happen. But the chances are extremely small. And here's how we're going to work around protecting you and protecting the rest of us from that occurring. We want to focus on not just hammering chokes. And like you said, position before submission, you get into that position, you're stuck, or you have a concern whatsoever. Tap, get out of it, reset, start over, work through it. Don't just sit there and take it. There's always going to be people, no matter what you tell them, they're just going to take it. We all know them. And that's their choice. They want to be that way. It's on them. But for others who have a concern, especially for the older group, who might have high blood pressure, who might have some of these other underlying conditions, we definitely want to be aware of it and say, all right, well, that's a pretty big freaking deal, because at our age, where most of us at least, we're established. We have families, we have kids, we have jobs, we have businesses, we have whatever. And we want to
got responsibilities.
That's right. We don't want them. Just we want them. I promise. Don't let my wife see that. I totally want them.
If you'd like a couple of extra, I can send a few your way.
Dude, I'm done. I got enough. I have twins and triplets that are 16 months apart. They're under 7, so it's a shit show all the time.
You're my hero as far as dads go, man.
3 are out of town right now, so having 2 girls today is like having no kids. It's awesome.
It's like you're on vacation, right?
Yeah, girls are the sweetest thing until they turn 12.
Well, then they're gonna then mommy's gonna do with them. I'm gonna take the boys 12.
Boys are always a pain in your ass. Like there's always this just like baseline. They're just a pain in your ass, but it never changes. They never get more. They never get less. They're just always that much, and then eventually they go to college.
The bar's level.
They're like sweet as pie. You just can't imagine it's life affirming. You're just like, this is the greatest. What the fuck happened to you?
Right. I still got a way to go. I'm going to be like 55 when they get to that point. So
sorry, we've digressed and totally ruined the conversation. And that was my fault. And I'm supposed to be running the podcast and keeping things in line. But
again, I think to sum it up, be honest. Let them know there's a risk, and have a plan on identification and prevention. And I think that's the big thing. The ability to identify, because these things I gave you, even though I gave a lot of medical terms, I still gave you kind of the layman's outline of it. You could have literally a printout of that, in your office, as you're a coach, or on the wall, or,
So a couple people in the Facebook group said, everybody should have every gym should have a little sign in there, so that it's very visible of what the signs are, so that people can see it on a regular basis. And I completely agree with that. And then, another step that a school could do, a coach could do to take it to one extra step is to identify in their community, who is our stroke hospital? Because another issue that I've seen is, okay, well, now we've identified the signs, but we don't want to just call 911 or just drop them off at if my buddies would have dropped me off at the local St. Joe's, and I would have never made it to the the stroke specialist. Like that could have been an issue, but it's even more of an issue for people who, probably have the signs, but they haven't been diagnosed yet with anything. So they haven't maybe had the stroke yet. Maybe they just had the dissection and they're showing signs, but they go to the wrong hospital who doesn't specialize in that. And then that hospital doesn't do the right imaging and they send them home. And then next thing you know, they have a stroke. And that's happened a lot. So the coaches could say, hey, in Milwaukee, we already know for a fact, Freighter Medical is the #1 place. Look at Chris's survival. And so that's where I want to be. Even now, so I'll go into like yoga classes and like hot yoga. I don't know if you guys have done it, but like it's intense. And I've gone in before, and each time I go in, I tell the person at the front desk, I'm just like, listen, I'm like, here's the deal. Like, I don't want to freak you out or anything like that, but I did have a stroke a couple years ago. I made a really good recovery, and I shouldn't have any issues. But that being said, if for some reason I go down in this class today, I'm like, just make sure you get me to Freighter. That's all I care about. Get me there fast. And they make a note in their system. And so, I mean, that's just something that I do now. You know what I mean? I tell people, I'm like, you got to get me to this place if I go down. And as a stroke survivor, it's a huge, like, I'm super scared. Like, I'm super scared to be alone. I don't want to have a stroke by myself, because if you have a stroke by yourself, you're pretty much SOL unless somebody finds you. I don't want to work out by myself, because I used to work out by myself all the time, but that's not a good idea to work out by yourself. Yeah, it's a scary thing. Having people around you it's important. So like, even after, like, if you're one of those guys, like if you're one of those alpha male jiu-jitsu guys, like everybody is in this community, and after practice, especially if you live alone, like, dude, you don't want to go home by yourself when you're having eye problems, head problems, migraines, neck problems. Because if you stroke, like, you're not going to be able to call 911. You know why? Because you're not going to know what 911 is. Like, what that, you just don't know how to do it. Like, that's just how it is when you're having a stroke. So, yeah.
Well, that's really great information, Chris. And I think just to kind of wrap up, because I don't want to keep you guys up all night. We've talked about some of the risk factors. We've talked about some of the signs leading up to maybe you have these injuries that could lead toward stroke. Talked about what to do afterward. Let's just talk about your recovery, because you obviously had a very life-changing traumatic event, and you're still doing jiu-jitsu to my understanding. So it sounds to me like you're not saying like, hey, let's just I have these problems, so now I'm just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You're just trying to do it in a way that is more healthful to you.
I here's the thing. As I get older, either the jiu-jitsu is going to get like way more technical, which I'm sure it will, if I keep doing what I'm doing, or at some point, I may not be able to train like I wanted to train. I was going to train until I was 60 years old, like 70 years old, like Helio Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chance that I won't. I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? Like, but right now, I'm still on the mat. 3 to 4 days a week. I still think that especially like, here's the thing. For me, again, I've been rolling for 12 years, and it's as much as it's like a part of my life now, and it's something that I do enjoy, and like everything, like my kids will tell you, like, it's everything's jiu-jitsu to dad. At the same time, I needed this break from jiu-jitsu. Right now, especially, like this COVID break is good for me. I'm taking care of my health by doing some yoga, some kettlebell stuff, but the recovery, I'm still training. I still believe in the sport. I still believe that like I said, the health benefits of flexibility and, that cardiovascular, what you get from training. It's just, it's just like nothing in the world. And it's just that but it's not just that. It's the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's the network of the brotherhood and the sisterhood that you have, that you don't have anywhere else. You don't have that at your corporate place. Like, people just want to check in, check out, go home, see their families. Like, I don't want to talk to Bob. You know what I mean? But jiu-jitsu, it's like, that's where they want to go. And those are the people they want to talk to. And that's the outlet. And I think that's why it's hard for a lot of people to give it up. Some of the people who have had strokes from jiu-jitsu have given it up because they looked at it and they're not as, see, it's easier for me to keep going than it is for a white belt who had a stroke. Here's why. I've been training for 12 years. I can if I have to control somebody, I can control white belts and blue belts and purple belts per se. And white belts can't control other white belts sometimes, and they control blue belts and they can't control. So it's almost like if you get that stroke as a white belt, and some of these guys have, it's tough to get back on the mat. For me, I was able to really focus on my choke defense. Right away, 2 hands on the choke hand, and every time somebody gets my back, it's like a life or death situation. Not doing any of the fancy berimbolo crap anymore. Not getting stacked on my neck anymore. Very guard, it's sweep, get on top, get to the back and finish. So I have had to adjust my game because it's like, it really is like a life or death. I look at it like a life or death situation every time I get on the mat now. I've never had that sense of urgency like I do now. And, again, especially when people start getting close to that neck, people start grabbing my collar. It's been tough. I freak out a little bit. You know what I mean? I have a lot of PTSD, a lot of anxiety. I'm
Understandable.
Every day I'm scared of dying because I'm not scared. I don't live with fear because if I did, I wouldn't be on the mats. You know what I mean? But it's in the back of my head, and it's just like, if I tell people, I'm like, if you're a surfer and you grew up next to the sea and that's what you love and that's what you know and that's where your friends are and that's everything to you, and then all of a sudden you go in that ocean one day and you get bit by a shark, but you don't die, you recover, you survive. Well, guess what? Now you know that shark sits in that ocean. Are you going to go back and surf? I bet you 95% of those guys are going to go back and surf, even though that they know the risk exists, and that's how I feel too every time I roll with those sharks at my school. But I've been good with my partners have been good with me. Some guys are a little bit more aggressive than others, and I have a target on my back, because I'm a brown belt. And I've accepted it. And you know what? I have over the last couple of years, I've tapped more in the last couple of years than I have in the 6 years before total. So, yeah, I'm fine with it. You know what I mean?
And that belies the question, because one of the biggest takeaways also that I've gotten from this podcast, interviewing just tons of people about these concepts of how to get better quicker and how to maintain longevity for the longest amount of time and be effective that whole time. And one of the number one things is just being willing to tap, and to say, instead of I lost, jiu-jitsu won. So it wasn't that I was bad that I lost. It was that there was a piece of jiu-jitsu that was good. I love jiu-jitsu, so I need to be okay with jiu-jitsu winning. I'm not looking at it as my loss. I'm looking at it as jiu-jitsu's win.
That's a great way to look at it.
Well, I think given the flow of this evening, we should probably wrap up. Chris, we're going to put the link to your YouTube videos in the show description, especially on the audio, and I should be able to figure out how to do it on the YouTube, because we'll put this up tonight or tomorrow actually.
Okay.
But if people want to reach out to you online, how do people learn more about you and what you're up to?
Yep. So the Nova Gyms, NOVAGYMS. That's the gyms we have in Milwaukee. You can get a hold of me at chrisdmartin.com, and that's got like that just takes you to like all of my blogs from the Strokes, info on me, info on the Marquette team. I'm very active right now in building a college jiu-jitsu league. We've had some competitions, team versus team. So something like that doesn't exist right now, but more people are starting to reach out to me because right now we're taking all the names of the teams and the schools that have jiu-jitsu clubs already. And we're going to be putting together tournaments and competitions for these kids. And we think it's going to take off because, wrestling's so big, football is big in college, baseball's really not. In some places it is, but, every college, like I went to Marquette, so we were basketball. And then in Wisconsin, we got the Badgers. And like, you go to a Badger game, it's just absolutely nuts. And I always tell people, I'm like, man, how cool would it be to see the Badgers versus Marquette in a jiu-jitsu competition? People would come and have fun and watch guys, attack each other. And I think you're going to see that. I mean, we've already done some school versus school competitions, and you're going to see it in the future. The hard part right now is getting all the coaches to agree on the rule set for it.
Sure.
That's just with anything. Like, people say, well, is jiu-jitsu going to go mainstream, or is it going to go to the Olympics or whatever it is? And it's just like, well, we got to kind of figure out that mainstream rule set. To be quite honest with you, I've been very public in saying that, the IBJJF, everybody just defaults to that. And it's not the end all be all. I like to see submission only with EBI overtime rules. Because the general public doesn't want to see, a points-based match, in my personal opinion. So they want to see a kill, they want to see the submission, and if somebody doesn't submit in a certain amount of time, we go to overtime. First submission or quickest escape wins. Then we move on to the next one, and we do it in a team format because it's a college. It's college versus college. It's not individual versus individual. It's this team versus this team. So then you just add the quintet mechanism into it, which is a single elimination, last man standing. And so that's what I'm pushing for. Most of the coaches are on board with it. We got a couple coaches that are like, we got to stay with IBJJF. But, IBJJFs, they're running their own empire. They don't want anything to do with it. And honestly, I think if IBJJF got a hold of that NCAA Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu League, they probably, it just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to say anything bad. They're good, but there's so many competitions and so many promoters, and, there's not one end. And you know what? Maybe there's enough competitions and rules for all kinds of tournaments. Maybe that's it. And I think that's the case. There's room for everything in jiu-jitsu.
So, that's my feeling too. And,
yes.
And super excited to see like a college jiu-jitsu league. That would be super fun. Maybe Kentucky wouldn't be very good at it, just because there's only basketball. It's just such a basketball school. Like
Kentucky's got a lot of MMA out there. There's a lot of good.
And we have good young jiu-jitsu practitioners. I was just giving the culture here crap because it's just like Marquette. You said it was all basketball. Like Kentucky's like that too. Yeah. It's just if you're not into basketball, you don't have too many friends here.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not into basketball.
Yeah, same for me. I'm a 5'7", like slow dude. Like what I can't even jump. Like
that's why we all gravitate so well to jiu-jitsu. We can be these like little super athletes. You know what I mean? We can, it's instead of watching a team, we can build ourselves, and that's I think the fun part. So, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time to help me spread awareness this month. Like I said, we've hit all the details. I don't think we could have said it any better. Ron, thank you for that. And having your expertise has been great. So let's definitely stay in touch. And as we progress this literature, there's going to be a lot of work to be done for spreading this information and having guys like you to help, like Harrison said, help put it in layman's terms. Because I'm trying my hardest, but I can't do it alone. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Super excited that we had the opportunity to talk to you, that we could, put it together. And Ron, I'm really, really appreciative that you were willing to help me out because, to be perfectly honest, I felt that I didn't know the questions to ask to put it to get this out in a way that's intelligent and useful. That's the main thing. When someone listens to this, I want them to leave this podcast feeling like, okay, I've got a few actionable things that if I do, I'm going to be a whole lot safer from this one thing that if it ever happens, I want to be ahead of it.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Glad to help.
Well, guys, thank you so much. And we're going to pause the recording here.